Marcus Webb's hands knew the weight of the torque wrench before his daughter's fingers closed around it. 25 years that tool had lived in the family, passed from his father's calloused palms to his own, and now, for one school day, to Emma's small grip. The metal caught the kitchen light, throwing a slice of reflection across her face as she turned it over with the careful reverence children reserve for objects that matter to adults. Remember, just for show and tell, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to see what daddies do at work. Emma's eyes, her mother's eyes, that particular shade of blue that still caught Marcus off guard 3 years after the funeral, tracked every groove in the handle. What does it do? Tightens bolts to exact specifications. Too loose, things fall apart. Too tight, metal cracks. Marcus crouched to her level, the morning cold seeping through the kitchen linoleum into his knees. It's about knowing when enough is enough. Like Goldilocks. Exactly like Goldilocks. She wrapped both hands around the handle, testing its heft. Can I tell them about the factory? Something in Marcus's chest compressed. A tightness that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn coffee sitting heavy in his gut. Tell them Riverside Manufacturing makes pressure equipment, big tanks and pipes that help factories run safely. And you make sure nothing explodes. The simplicity of a 7-year-old's understanding, both accurate and incomplete. Something like that, sweetheart. The Ford's heater took 3 miles to kick in, blowing cold air that gradually warmed as they rolled through Bridgeport's industrial district. Smokestacks punctured the November sky, their plumes spreading like ink in water. Emma pressed her forehead against the passenger window, breath fogging the glass in rhythmic circles. Daddy, why do you go to work before the sun comes up? Because the most important checks happen when systems are quiet. Before production starts, before pressure builds, you can hear things other people miss. What kind of things? Marcus considered how to explain acoustic resonance and harmonic frequency to a second grader. Imagine if your heartbeat started skipping every third beat. You'd feel it, right? Even if a doctor's stethoscope said everything looked normal. Emma's hand went to her chest, feeling the steady thump beneath her ribs. That would be scary. That's what I listen for. The heartbeat of the machines. Bridgeport Elementary's drop-off line crawled forward with the painful slowness of Monday morning routines. Parents in idling SUVs checked phones, sipped travel mugs, performed the small rituals that bridge sleep and work. Marcus pulled to the curb, shifted into park, and Emma unbuckled with practiced efficiency. He met her at the passenger door, kneeling on the wet pavement to bring himself level with her face. The torque wrench hung from her backpack like a medieval weapon, comically oversized. Learned something new today. I always do. She threw her arms around his neck, squeezing with the desperate strength of children who've learned that people leave and don't come back. You be careful at work, okay? Don't let anything explode. I'll do my best, sweetheart. He watched until she disappeared through the school's double doors, then sat in the idling truck for 30 seconds longer than necessary. The unease that had been building since 5:47 a.m., since that first moment in Sector 4, refused to dissipate. Marcus had learned to trust his gut the way pilots trust instruments in fog, but anxiety and intuition wore the same face, and distinguishing between them required a clarity he didn't currently possess. Riverside Manufacturing sprawled across 12 acres of Pennsylvania industrial real estate, a complex of corrugated metal buildings connected by covered walkways and loading bays. The parking lot at 7:35 a.m. held maybe 60 vehicles, first shift arriving, night shift preparing to depart, the overlap period when knowledge transferred through hurried conversations and scribbled notes. Diego Santos leaned against the time clock, nursing a thermos of coffee that smelled like his wife Maria's handiwork, cinnamon and something darker. His maintenance uniform, identical to Marcus's, bore the oil stains and burn marks that came from 12-hour shifts around heavy machinery. You look like hell, hermano. Didn't sleep great. Marcus swiped his badge, the electronic beep confirming his 7:38 a.m. arrival. What's this meeting about? Christine's calling it Operational Efficiency Review, which means she's about to make our lives harder. Diego's expression carried the particular wariness of a man with 4 kids and a mortgage. She cut the Sector 2 maintenance budget last week. Now we've got seals leaking like a screen door on a submarine. She approved that? Not approved, denied. Said it wasn't mission-critical spending. Diego made air quotes with his free hand. I showed her the leak rate data, the projected failure timeline, everything. She said we could patch it until next fiscal year. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Deferred maintenance wasn't cost savings. It was disaster on layaway, interest compounding until the bill came due in blood and lawsuits. That's not how industrial systems work. Tell her that. I tried. She looked at me like I was speaking Sanskrit. The locker room smelled of industrial soap and old sweat, 30 years of shifts compressed into cinder block walls. Marcus changed into his work blues, the fabric soft from countless washings. His name embroidered over the left pocket in thread that had faded from bright gold to tarnished yellow. His father had worn the same uniform in this same plant before the cancer took him. Different name over the pocket, same commitment to the work. You checking Sector 4 before the meeting? Already did, early this morning. Diego caught something in Marcus's tone. And I need to write it up. Something's off with the pressure dynamics. Off how? Harmonic resonance, high-frequency emissions, the kind of thing that shows up weeks before a catastrophic failure. Diego's face went carefully neutral, the expression of a man calculating risk against reward, family security against moral obligation. You planning to report it? Already planning the email. Marcus, after what happened in September, I know. And that Henderson contract thing. I know, Diego. Christine's looking for reasons. Don't hand her one. Marcus slammed his locker harder than necessary, the metallic bang echoing off tile walls. So I should ignore a potential disaster because it might piss off management? That's your professional recommendation? I'm saying pick your battles. We've got families depending on these jobs. And those families are working inside a facility with compromised safety systems. How's that supposed to sit with my conscience? Diego set down his thermos with deliberate care. Your conscience isn't going to feed Emma if you get fired. Think about that. The words landed like a physical blow, accurate and cruel in equal measure. Marcus grabbed his hard hat and tool belt, unable to formulate a response that didn't sound either self-righteous or defensive. Meeting's in 10 minutes, don't be late. Sector 4 waited like an accusation. Marcus stood at the threshold, his digital audio recorder in hand, a device he'd purchased with his own money 3 years ago after a near-miss incident that official reports somehow failed to capture. The red light blinked as he pressed record. November 18th, 7:47 a.m., Sector 4 main pressure line inspection. He moved deeper into the space, past the junction boxes and monitoring stations, toward the central manifold where 6 major lines converged. Ambient noise level, approximately 72 decibels. Production offline, system at idle pressure. He stopped, closed his eyes, and listened. The human ear, when trained, could detect frequencies most people filtered as background noise. Marcus had spent 12 years developing that particular skill, the way musicians develop perfect pitch, the way sommeliers distinguish terroirs. There, a whistle at the upper edge of perception, maybe 8,500 hertz. Not loud, but persistent. The sound of metal under stress, molecules shifting, crystalline structures beginning to fail at the microscopic level. High-frequency acoustic emission detected. Frequency estimated 8 to 9 kilohertz, consistent with pressure-induced resonance in carbon steel piping. He approached the main gauge, 128 psi, well within the normal operating range of 100 to 150. But the needle, Marcus leaned closer, watching the tiny tremor that most people would dismiss as normal mechanical vibration. Gauge reading 128 psi, needle flutter observed, approximately 0.5 millimeter oscillation at 2 to 3 hertz frequency. The combination of symptoms triggered every alarm bell 12 years of experience had installed in his nervous system. Acoustic resonance plus needle flutter equaled internal stress. Internal stress meant structural compromise. Structural compromise meant he stopped the recording and pulled out the maintenance logbook, the physical paper version that predated the digital system by decades. Some old-timers trusted paper more than computers, and Marcus had learned to appreciate their paranoia. The book fell open to the current week. November 15th, yesterday, His own entry, written in the careful print he'd developed specifically for logbooks. Sector 4, unusual pressure fluctuation during startup sequence. Recommend comprehensive inspection. He flipped back a page. November 12th, Sector 4, acoustic anomaly detected by Robert H. during night shift. Back another page. November 8th, unusual pressure pattern in Sector 4 mainline, Diego S. 3 independent observations over 10 days. 3 different technicians noticing the same system exhibiting abnormal behavior. That wasn't coincidence. That was a developing pattern, the kind that should trigger immediate investigation. Marcus turned to the previous week, looking for the initial reports that would have launched a formal inquiry. Nothing. The pages were blank. No, not blank. He held the paper up to the fluorescent lights, angling it to catch shadows. Correction fluid. Someone had carefully painted over multiple entries with whiteout, then smoothed the pages to disguise the alteration. He could make out fragments of text beneath the chemical veil. Words pressing through like accusations. Pressure, recommend, shut down, inspection required. Someone had systematically erased weeks of safety concerns. Someone had decided those warnings weren't worth preserving. Someone had made a deliberate choice to hide evidence of a developing problem. The meeting room on the second floor held 25 people in a space designed for 18. Christine Novak stood at the head of the table, laptop open, projector casting her PowerPoint onto the far wall. She wore charcoal gray, her hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. No jewelry except a simple watch that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Raymond Caldwell occupied the seat to her right, the owner's traditional position, though he looked more like a hostage than a leader. 58 years old, hair gone silver, face carrying the broken capillary flush of a man whose blood pressure medication wasn't quite doing his job. He'd started Riverside Manufacturing 31 years ago with his father, back when Bridgeport still had a functioning steel mill and men could build careers with their hands instead of their degrees. Now he stared at his iPad, scrolling through something that required his full attention, apparently unable to make eye contact with the employees who'd built his legacy. Christine clicked her remote. The first slide appeared. Q4 performance goals, 15% efficiency increase required. Good morning, let's begin. No pleasantries, no small talk, just the clipped efficiency of someone who'd learned management from business schools instead of factory floors. Q4 is critical for Riverside's competitive position. We're implementing new protocols to maximize productivity and minimize unnecessary downtime. She advanced to the next slide. New maintenance protocols, effective immediately. All maintenance activities must be pre-approved 48 hours in advance. No unauthorized system shutdowns. All emergencies require management authorization before action. These procedures ensure we're making data-driven decisions, not reactive ones based on anecdotal concerns. Marcus felt Diego tense in the adjacent chair. Around the table, other technicians exchanged glances. The silent communication of people who'd worked together long enough to develop a shared language of skepticism. Marcus raised his hand. Christine's eyes found him with the precision of a rifle scope locking onto a target. Mr. Webb, question? What defines an emergency under the new protocol? If we have a situation developing that could cause imminent harm, 48 hours might be what, Mr. Webb? Too long? Christine's smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. Let me show you something. She clicked forward. The new slide made Marcus's stomach drop. Case study, unnecessary shutdowns, cost analysis. A table appeared. Boom. 3 rows of data that felt like punches to the solar plexus. September 15th. Marcus Webb shut down line 3. Erratic gauge reading. No issue found. Loss, $12,400, September 28th. Marcus Webb refused overtime run. Safety concern. Henderson contract lost. Loss, $67,000. October 10th. Marcus Webb requested premature seal replacement. Sector 2. Deemed unnecessary. Loss, $8,200. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus could feel every eye shifting toward him, some sympathetic, most just grateful they weren't the target. Mr. Webb, I respect your 12 years of experience. Christine's voice carried the particular condescension of youth explaining patience to age. But we need team players who trust the systems we've invested millions of dollars developing, not mechanics who think they know better than our engineers. The anger that rose in Marcus's chest had teeth. Those shutdowns had legitimate justifications. September 15th, the gauge wasn't just erratic. It was showing pressure oscillations that indicated valve degradation. If we'd kept running, we would have completed the production cycle without incident, which is exactly what happened when we restarted. Christine closed her laptop with a decisive click. The Henderson contract, they requested we operate at 180% of rated capacity. You called it unsafe, but Mayfield Industrial took that same contract and executed it flawlessly. They trusted their equipment. We lost $2.1 million in annual revenue because we were too cautious. Or because we follow OSHA regulations that prohibit operating equipment beyond manufacturer specifications. Mr. Webb, Raymond Caldwell spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who'd stopped fighting battles he knew he'd lose. Ms. Novak is here to help us modernize our operations. Sometimes that means adjusting our risk tolerance to match industry standards. Industry standards or corners we're cutting to make the company look profitable? The silence that followed felt like falling. Diego's hand found Marcus's arm under the table. A warning, a plea, a friend trying to pull another friend back from a cliff edge. Christine's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. We'll discuss this further in private. Meeting continues. The next 40 minutes passed in a blur of production metrics, efficiency targets, and cost reduction initiatives. Marcus heard maybe a third of it, his mind replaying that slide over and over, his name, his decisions presented as liabilities instead of the careful judgments they'd been. When the meeting ended, people filed out quickly, maintaining the diplomatic speed of witnesses leaving an accident scene. Diego paused at the door, caught between loyalty and self-preservation, then chose survival and kept walking. Marcus gathered his notepad, prepared to follow, when Christine's voice stopped him. Mr. Webb, a moment. They were alone now, Christine, Marcus, and Raymond, who looked like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else. I'm going to be direct. Christine perched on the edge of the table, arms crossed. Your employment here is under review. You have a documented pattern of challenging management decisions and creating unnecessary alarm. That behavior is no longer acceptable. I create unnecessary alarm by reporting legitimate safety concerns. You create friction by assuming every minor anomaly requires shutting down multi-million-dollar systems. That's not safety consciousness. That's risk aversion bordering on paranoia. Marcus felt something cold settle in his gut. This wasn't a reprimand. This was the groundwork for termination, the careful building of a paper trail that would justify whatever decision had already been made. Mr. Caldwell, you've known me for 12 years. You know I don't make frivolous reports. Raymond couldn't meet his eyes. I know you're a dedicated employee, Marcus, but maybe Christine's right. Maybe we've been too quick to hit the brakes when a little faith in our systems would serve us better. The betrayal hurt more than Marcus expected. He'd been at Raymond's father's funeral, had watched this man build Riverside from a two-building operation into a regional player. Now Raymond sat there letting a management consultant half his age rewrite 3 decades of safety culture. If you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Actually, Christine said, you have a report to revise. What report? This morning's Sector 4 inspection. I've already spoken with our system engineers in Chicago. They reviewed the remote monitoring data and confirmed everything is operating within normal parameters. So whatever concerns you were planning to document, don't. Marcus's hand instinctively went to the audio recorder in his pocket. I have acoustic evidence of nothing that shows up on our professional diagnostic equipment. Mr. Webb, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You hear something that concerns you, and instead of trusting our multi-million-dollar monitoring systems, you want to shut down production based on your personal interpretation of ambient noise. It's not ambient noise. It's harmonic resonance at, I don't care what frequency you think you heard. Christine stood, restoring the height advantage. Here's what's going to happen. You are not going to file a report about Sector 4. You are not going to recommend any shutdowns, inspections, or maintenance actions without my explicit pre-approval. And you are going to spend the next few weeks demonstrating that you can be a team player, or we will be having a very different conversation with HR. Are we clear? The words Marcus wanted to say would have ended his career on the spot. Instead, he swallowed them, tasting bile, and managed a single syllable. Clear. Good, back to work. Marcus made it to the stairwell before the shaking started. He leaned against the concrete wall, knuckles white on the railing, trying to process what had just happened. 12 years of dedication, of staying late to fix problems, of putting safety above convenience. All of it reduced to a liability column in Christine's spreadsheet. Diego found him there 5 minutes later, 2 paper cups of break room coffee in hand. He offered one without speaking, and they stood together in the fluorescent quiet. I tried to warn you, Hermano. I know you did. What are you going to do? Marcus thought about Emma at school, showing Mrs. Rodriguez's class the torque wrench. His daughter explaining that her daddy made sure nothing exploded. The pride in her voice, the certainty that her father was one of the good guys. I'm going to do my job, document the Sector 4 issues properly, submit the report, and let the chips fall where they may. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then, because if I don't and something happens, if people get hurt because I kept my mouth shut to save my paycheck, how do I look Emma in the eye after that? Diego nodded slowly, the acknowledgement of a man who understood the logic even if he couldn't follow it himself. You're a better man than me, Marcus Webb. I'm just a man who can't live with the alternative. The break room at 10:05 a.m. smelled of burnt coffee and the microwave someone had used to reheat fish. Marcus claimed a corner computer, logged into the company email system, and opened a new message. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, considering phrasing, weighing consequences, calculating the odds that this email wouldn't become another nail in his employment coffin. He typed, Sector 4 pressure system, immediate attention required. Priority, high. To Christine Novak, Raymond Caldwell. The body of the email took 15 minutes to compose, each word chosen with the precision of a man defusing a bomb. He documented the acoustic anomalies, referenced the logbook entries, cited specific OSHA regulations and industry standards. He included cost estimates for the recommended inspection, $18,000 to $25,000, 4 to 6 hours of downtime. He acknowledged the production impact while emphasizing that catastrophic failure would cost infinitely more. He cited the 2019 Pennsylvania chemical plant explosion. 3 workers killed when pressure systems failed after weeks of ignored warning signs. The 21 Texas refinery incident, 7 fatalities, $340 million in damages, criminal charges filed against management, similar symptoms, similar negligence, similar outcomes waiting to happen. Marcus read the email 3 times, checking for inflammatory language, ensuring every claim was defensible. Then, before courage could desert him, he clicked send. The confirmation appeared. Message delivered at 10:23 a.m. At 10:24, his phone showed a read receipt. Christine Novak had opened the email. He waited. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 30. The coffee went cold in his hands, but Marcus couldn't move, couldn't do anything except watch his inbox for the response that would determine whether he still had a career. At 10:47, his phone buzzed. Not an email, a text message from HR. Mr. Webb, Ms. Novak has requested an immediate meeting with you in Human Resources. Please report to Conference Room B at 11 o'clock a.m. Margaret Chen, HR Director. Diego appeared in the doorway, having apparently developed a sixth sense for when Marcus was about to step on another landmine. He read the text over Marcus's shoulder and let out a low whistle. That was fast. Yeah. You want me to come with you, moral support? No point both of us being in the blast radius. Marcus, I'm serious, Diego. You've got 4 kids and Maria's shop is barely breaking even. Don't sacrifice your family's security for my principles. Diego gripped Marcus's shoulder, the silent communication of men who'd worked dangerous jobs together long enough to develop a language beyond words. Then he left, taking his questions and his concern with him. Marcus spent the remaining 13 minutes in the restroom, washing his hands with the methodical focus of a surgeon preparing for an operation that wouldn't save the patient. The face in the mirror looked older than 36. Stress and single parenthood had etched lines around his eyes that hadn't existed when Sarah was alive. She would have told him to fight. Sarah had possessed a fierce certainty about right and wrong that left no room for political calculations. She would have marched into that meeting, consequences be damned, because some things mattered more than paychecks. But Sarah had never had to raise a 7-year-old alone while drowning in medical debt. Conference Room B was smaller than the morning's venue, designed for difficult conversations that didn't require witnesses. Christine sat on one side of the table. Margaret Chen, 50-something, competent, perpetually exhausted by her job, on the other. A manila folder rested between them, already prepared, already containing whatever documentation they'd need to justify what came next. Marcus took the remaining chair. Nobody offered coffee. Margaret opened the folder, her expression professionally neutral in a way that screamed bad news. "Mr. Webb, thank you for coming. This is a difficult conversation, but we believe in being direct and respectful." The preamble to every termination Marcus had ever witnessed. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "Ms. Novak has raised concerns about your performance, specifically regarding your judgment on safety protocols and your pattern of challenging management decisions." Margaret slid a document across the table, his employment record, annotated with highlighter marks, that made 12 years of service look like a chronicle of insubordination. "Additionally, your email this morning, sent directly to senior management against explicit instructions, demonstrates a continued unwillingness to work within our updated protocols. I followed the existing protocol for reporting safety concerns." "You followed the old protocol," Christine corrected. "The new one, which was explained this morning, requires management pre-approval before any safety reports are filed. That's not how OSHA compliance works. Employees have a legal right." "Mr. Webb." Margaret's interruption carried the tired patience of someone who'd had this argument before. "We're not disputing your legal rights. We're addressing a pattern of behavior that's become detrimental to team cohesion and operational efficiency." Detrimental to efficiency or inconvenient to a sale? Christine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe, that he'd figured it out. "I don't know what you're referring to." "The Hartwell Industries acquisition. The confidential document on your computer. The reason you're burying safety concerns and pushing for 0 incidents this quarter, because buyers want clean books and dead workers are bad for valuations." Margaret looked at Christine, a silent question passing between them. Christine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Webb, whether or not Riverside is engaged in confidential business discussions is irrelevant to your employment situation. What matters is that you've repeatedly demonstrated an inability to adapt to new leadership and new protocols. That leaves us with limited options." Marcus felt the room compress around him, oxygen becoming scarce. "You're firing me. We're terminating your employment for cause, effective immediately. You will have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and exit the premises. Security will escort you to ensure—" "Security?" The word came out sharper than intended. "I've worked here 12 years. I don't need an escort to clean out my locker." "Company policy for terminations." Margaret pushed a second document across the table. "This is your separation agreement. It includes severance pay, 2 weeks, which is generous given the cause termination, and requires your signature acknowledging that you understand the terms." Marcus scanned the document. Buried in the legal boilerplate, a clause that made his blood run cold. "Employee agrees not to disparage Riverside Manufacturing or its management in any public forum, including but not limited to social media, news outlets, or regulatory complaints. Violation of this non-disparagement agreement will result in forfeiture of all severance benefits and potential legal action for damages." This is a gag order. It's a standard non-disparagement clause. Standard? Marcus looked at Christine. "You're buying my silence. If I go to OSHA, if I contact the fire marshal, if I tell anyone about the Sector 4 problems, you'll sue me for everything I have. We're protecting the company's reputation from unfounded allegations by a disgruntled former employee." Christine's voice carried no apology, no uncertainty. "You have 2 options, Mr. Webb. Sign the agreement, take your severance, and move on with your life. Or refuse to sign, lose the severance, and still be escorted out because the termination stands either way. The calculation was brutally simple. 2 weeks' pay, roughly $3,400, represented Emma's food, utilities, and car insurance for the next month. Without it, they'd burn through savings in 3 weeks and be facing eviction by Christmas. But signing meant abandoning 180 workers to whatever disaster was building in Sector 4. It meant choosing his daughter's immediate security over other people's lives. Marcus thought about the torque wrench Emma had carried to school that morning. Too loose, things fall apart. Too tight, metal cracks. It's about knowing when enough is enough. He picked up the pen, put it down, picked it up again. I need time to think about this. You have until the end of business today. Margaret closed his folder with practiced finality. After that, the severance offer expires. Marcus stood, legs unsteady, and walked to the door. As he reached for the handle, Christine spoke one more time. Mr. Webb, for what it's worth, I don't enjoy this, but running a profitable company means making difficult decisions. Sometimes individual concerns have to be sacrificed for the greater good. He turned back, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since the meeting began. The greater good. Is that what you tell yourself when you look in the mirror? That you're serving some abstract principle by ignoring concrete dangers? I'm serving 180 employees who depend on this company for their livelihoods. I'm serving shareholders who invested their retirement savings. I'm serving a legacy that predates both of us. Sometimes that requires accepting calculated risks. And when your calculations are wrong, when Sector 4 fails and people die because you prioritize acquisition terms over human safety, Christine's expression finally cracked, revealing something raw beneath the MBA armor. Then I'll live with that. Just like you'll live with choosing your own self-righteousness over your daughter's stability. We all make compromises, Mr. Webb. Don't pretend yours are more noble than mine. The workshop felt like foreign territory now. Familiar equipment turned alien by the knowledge that Marcus no longer belonged here. He moved through the space in a daze, collecting tools from his designated bench, personal items from the locker, 12 years of accumulated belonging condensed into a single cardboard box. Diego appeared, wordless, and helped pack. The other mechanics maintained careful distance, the social mathematics of proximity to the newly contagious. Nobody wanted to be associated with the guy who'd just gotten fired. At the bottom of his locker, beneath the spare boots and the backup hard hat, Marcus found the photo he'd taped to the inside door 3 years ago. Sarah, Emma, and him at Hershey Park, Emma's 3rd birthday, cotton candy and carousel horses, and Sarah's laugh captured in a freeze frame of impossible happiness. Before the diagnosis, before the chemotherapy, before the hospice bed and the morphine drip in the morning he had woken up alone. He pressed the photo between 2 folders, protecting it from the cardboard's rough edges. You're really going through with it. Diego kept his voice low, aware of listening ears. Don't have much choice. You could sign the separation agreement, take the severance, let it go. Could you? Diego was quiet for a long time. No, probably not. But I've got Maria to keep me honest. You've only got Emma, I know. Marcus closed the box, sealing 12 years into a cube of corrugated cardboard, which is exactly why I can't sign that agreement. Because someday she's going to ask me about this, about the day I got fired, and I need to be able to tell her I did the right thing, even when it was hard. The right thing doesn't pay mortgages, hermano. Neither does cowardice. The walk from the workshop to the main gate took 3 minutes but felt like 3 hours. Tom Granger, security guard, 52 years old, Marine Corps veteran, walked beside Marcus with the rigid discomfort of a man executing orders he disagreed with. For what it's worth, this is bullshit. Tom kept his eyes forward, talking without moving his lips, a skill learned in barracks where walls had ears. Everybody knows you're the best mechanic here. Everybody knows Christine's playing politics. Doesn't change anything. No, it doesn't. They were 10 feet from the gate when Marcus heard it again, that high-frequency whistle from Sector 4, now audible even from outside the building. The sound had grown louder, more insistent. Metal screaming at a pitch most human ears couldn't consciously process, but that registered anyway as background unease. Marcus stopped. Tom stopped beside him. "You hear that?" Tom tilted his head, listening. "Hear what?" "That whistle, high-pitched, coming from Sector 4. "I don't hear anything unusual, Marcus." Of course he didn't. The frequency was right at the edge of perception, and Tom's 20 years of rifle fire had probably cost him the upper range of his hearing. But Marcus heard it clear as a fire alarm, and the sound made his skin crawl. He pulled out his phone, checked the time. 12:47 p.m. Emma's school day ended at 3. He had 2 hours and 13 minutes to figure out what came next. "Tom, I need you to do something for me." "Don't ask me to break protocol, Marcus. I've got 3 years to retirement." "I'm not asking you to break protocol. I'm asking you to remember this conversation. If something happens in Sector 4, if there's an incident, an accident, anything, I need you to testify that I tried to warn them, that I heard the warning signs, and I did everything I could to prevent it." Tom's weathered face showed conflict, duty warring with conscience. "Marcus, please, not for me, for the guys still working in there." A long pause, then barely audible. "I'll remember." Marcus's truck sat in the far corner of the parking lot, collecting November chill. He threw the cardboard box into the passenger seat, where Emma usually sat, where she'd sat this morning talking about Goldilocks and torque wrenches, and climbed behind the wheel. The engine turned over on the second try, and Marcus sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the factory complex that had been his professional home for 12 years. Somewhere in that maze of metal and machinery, pressure was building. Somewhere in those pipes, metal was developing stress fractures. Somewhere in those systems, a disaster was incubating, waiting for the right combination of heat and pressure and time to bloom into catastrophe. And there was nothing Marcus Webb could do about it except drive away and hope he was wrong. The thought made him physically ill. He pulled out his phone, opened a new text message, and typed, "Diego, check Sector 4 tonight. I'm serious, something's wrong." His thumb hovered over send. If Diego followed through and got caught, he'd be the next one in Margaret Chen's office, signing his own separation agreement. Marcus would have cost his best friend his job, left Maria and 4 kids without the primary income. But if Diego didn't check and something happened, Marcus hit send. Then he put the truck in gear and drove toward Bridgeport Elementary, where a 7-year-old girl was learning about show and tell, completely unaware that her father had just sacrificed their financial security on the altar of principles that might not matter at all. The late afternoon sun turned Bridgeport's industrial buildings into geometric shadows, all sharp angles and long darkness. Marcus sat in the school parking lot 40 minutes early, unable to go home, unable to face the empty house and the stack of bills that had just become infinitely more urgent. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. A woman's voice, young, nervous, speaking quickly like someone afraid of being overheard. "Mr. Webb, this is Sarah Chen from the control room. I believe you about Sector 4. The pressure readings have been climbing all day, and the pattern is wrong, and I'm scared, but I don't know what to do." And Christine said, "Anyone who reports concerns will be written up, and I need this job, but I also can't." "Sarah, slow down. Take a breath." He heard her inhale, shaky on the edge of panic. "I shouldn't be calling you. If they find out..." "They won't. What are you seeing?" "Pressure oscillations. Started around 9 this morning, right after you sent that email. The system's breathing. Up 5 psi, down 3, up 7, down 4. It's fighting itself. And the readings are trending upward overall. We were at a 128 this morning. Now we're at 142. Marcus felt ice water replace the blood in his veins. 142 is high normal, still within spec, but it shouldn't be climbing steadily. I know. I checked historical data going back 6 months. This pattern started small in July, and it's been getting worse. Exponential curve. And when I showed Christine yesterday, she told me I was imagining things. Sarah, listen to me carefully. You need to document everything. Screenshots, data exports, anything you can save securely at home, not on company servers. If this system fails, when it fails, there's going to be an investigation, and you need to have evidence that you tried to raise concerns. But what about now? What do I do right now? How high would the pressure have to get before the automatic shutdown triggers? 155 psi. That's the hard limit programmed into the safety system. Okay, if it hits a 155, the system should shut itself down automatically. That buys time for inspection. Mr. Webb? Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. What if someone disabled the automatic shutdown? The question hit Marcus like a fist to the solar plexus. Why would you ask that? Because I was reviewing system logs this morning, and there's a manual override entry from 2 weeks ago, November 4th. It allows the system to operate above 155 psi for maintenance flexibility. Signed off by Christine Novak. Marcus closed his eyes, seeing the picture now in its horrible totality. Christine wasn't just ignoring warning signs. She'd actively dismantled safety systems that might interfere with production schedules. She'd removed the last automatic barrier between normal operations and catastrophic failure. Sarah, you need to get out of there. I can't just leave. I'm on shift until 7. Then at 7, you walk out and you don't come back until someone addresses these problems. And Sarah, thank you for calling. That took courage. Mr. Webb, if something bad happens, if people get hurt because I didn't do enough, you did what you could. The responsibility lies with people who had the authority to act and chose not to. Remember that. She hung up without saying goodbye, probably terrified of being caught on a personal call during shift hours. Marcus sat in the pickup, processing the new information, calculating probabilities and outcomes. 142 psi and climbing. If the trend continued, if Sarah's exponential curve was accurate, the system could hit critical pressure sometime tonight or early tomorrow. And with the automatic shutdowns disabled, nothing would stop it from climbing into the danger zone except human intervention that management had explicitly forbidden. The school bell rang at 3:15, releasing a flood of children into the autumn afternoon. Emma emerged in the middle of the pack, her backpack with the torque wrench bouncing against her shoulders. She spotted Marcus's truck, and her whole face lit up with the uncomplicated joy of 7-year-olds whose fathers are still heroes. She climbed into the passenger seat, energy barely contained. Daddy, everybody loved the wrench. Miss Rodriguez let me show how it works, and Jeremy Morrison said his dad has one just like it, and she stopped, reading his face with the emotional radar children develop when their family structure is fragile. Daddy, what's wrong? Marcus forced a smile, the kind of lie parents tell to protect kids from truths they're not ready to handle. Nothing, sweetheart, just tired, long day at work. Did you make sure nothing exploded? The question landed like an arrow, perfectly aimed without intent. I did my best, Em. That's all you can do, right? Your best? Right, that's all anyone can do. They drove home in silence, Emma chattering about school friends and playground politics while Marcus calculated finances in his head. 2 weeks severance if he signed the gag order, maybe a month of unemployment benefits after that. Savings would last another month if they were careful. Then what? Sell the house? Move to a cheaper apartment? Pull Emma out of Bridgeport Elementary where she'd finally started making friends? The house waited like an accusation. 1,200 square feet of suburban compromise, purchased 5 years ago when Sarah was pregnant and the future still held promise. Marcus carried Emma's backpack inside while she ran to the kitchen for a snack. The stack of mail on the counter included the mortgage statement, $1,950 due December 1st, 13 days away, plus utilities, car insurance, Emma's school lunch account, the medical debt payment that never seemed to get smaller no matter how many checks he wrote. Emma appeared with an apple and a concerned expression. Daddy, are you sure you're okay? I'm sure, sweetheart. Just thinking about boring grown-up stuff. Like money? Kids were too perceptive. Yeah, like money. She took a bite of apple, chewing thoughtfully. Mrs. Rodriguez said money is just a tool, like your wrench. It's not good or bad, it just helps us do things. Mrs. Rodriguez is very smart. She also said the most important things don't cost money, like being brave and helping people and keeping promises. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, hairline fractures spreading through whatever armor he'd built around the soft parts. He knelt down to Emma's level, taking her small hands in his larger, calloused ones. I need to tell you something. I don't have a job anymore. They let me go today." Her eyes went wide, filling with the particular fear children experience when their foundation starts to shake. "Why, did you do something bad?" "No, sweetheart. I did something right, but the people in charge didn't agree it was right. Sometimes that happens." "So we don't have money now?" "We have some money, enough for a while, and I'll find another job. But things might be different for a bit. We might have to be more careful about spending." Emma processed this with the seriousness of someone who'd already lost one parent and understood that bad things actually happened in real life, not just in stories. "Because you were keeping people safe at the factory?" "Something like that." "Then you did the right thing." She said it with absolute certainty, the moral clarity of childhood. "Mommy always said you were the bravest person she knew, because you did the right thing even when it was hard." Marcus pulled her into a hug, breathing in the strawberry shampoo smell of her hair, feeling the small bones of her spine through her school clothes. "I love you, kiddo, more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Daddy." She pulled back, studying his face. "We're going to be okay, right?" "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be okay." He hoped he wasn't lying. Evening came early in November, darkness pressing against the windows by 5:30. Marcus made dinner. Spaghetti from a box, sauce from a jar, the kind of bachelor cooking he'd perfected after Sarah died. Emma did homework at the kitchen table while he moved through familiar routines on autopilot. At 7 o'clock, his phone buzzed with a text from Diego. "Checked Sector 4 like you asked. You're right. Sound is worse. Told Robert, but he says we need Christine's approval to shut down. Documenting everything. Be careful, man." Another buzz. Different number. Sarah Chen. "Pressure at 148. Climbing faster now. Night shift supervisor won't authorize shutdown without management approval. I'm scared." Marcus stood at the kitchen sink, dishes forgotten, watching the numbers climb in his mind. 148 psi. The exponential curve Sarah had mentioned would put the system at critical levels, 155 and above, sometime around midnight. Maybe sooner if the deterioration was accelerating. And nobody with authority was willing to act. He thought about the separation agreement, sitting unsigned on the passenger seat of his truck. 2 weeks' pay in exchange for silence. Financial security in exchange for complicity. The news played on the living room television, background noise while Emma colored at the coffee table. Marcus wasn't paying attention until specific words cut through his mental calculations. Industrial explosion. Kentucky. 4 workers killed. He walked to the living room. The screen showed a factory complex, or what remained of it. One building completely destroyed, another partially collapsed, fire trucks and ambulances clustered like antibodies around a wound. The reporter, young and earnest, stood behind police tape delivering the summary. Preliminary investigation suggests pressure system failure. Sources close to the investigation say workers had reported unusual sounds and readings in the days before the incident, but management dismissed the concerns as routine. OSHA has opened an investigation. 4 workers are confirmed dead, 11 injured, 3 critically. The plant had passed its most recent safety inspection just 2 months ago. Emma looked up from her coloring. "Daddy, that looks like your factory." "No, sweetheart, that's in Kentucky. Different place. But not different at all. Same industry, same equipment, and same warning signs ignored, same managerial calculation that short-term productivity outweighed long-term safety, same outcome waiting to happen at Riverside Manufacturing while Marcus sat in his living room watching other people's tragedy play out on television. He picked up his phone, pulled up Christine's contact information, and started typing. 4 workers just died in Kentucky. Same symptoms I reported. Shut down Sector 4 before you kill someone. His thumb hovered over send. If he sent this message, Christine would have documentation that Marcus violated the non-disparagement agreement before he'd even signed it. She'd weaponize it, use it to deny his severance, maybe even sue for harassment. But 4 people were dead in Kentucky because someone in management made the same choice Christine was making. And 180 people at Riverside were working around a system that was hours, maybe less, from catastrophic failure. Marcus deleted the message, typed a different one. "Please, I'm begging you, just inspect Sector 4, that's all I'm asking." Also deleted it. In the end, he sent nothing, because what words could possibly bridge the gap between his certainty and her skepticism? What combination of syllables could make her care about abstractions like proper pressure dynamics when acquisition deals and quarterly targets felt infinitely more concrete? Emma climbed onto the couch beside him, leaning against his side. Are you thinking about work? Yeah. About the people there? Yeah. They're lucky to have you, Daddy, even if the bosses don't know it. Marcus kissed the top of her head, wondering how a 7-year-old had developed better moral clarity than most adults he knew. After Emma went to bed, Marcus sat in the darkened living room with his laptop, researching. He pulled up OSHA reporting procedures, online forms that promised a response within 3 to 5 business days. 3 days, 72 hours. By then, whatever was building in Sector 4 would have either dissipated or catastrophically failed. The timing was useless. He tried the Bridgeport Fire Marshal's office, voicemail. The message explained that non-emergency inquiries would be returned during normal business hours. It was 9:47 p.m. Normal business hours were a lifetime away. He drafted an email to Elizabeth Morrison, the industrial safety director he'd found during his research, the one who'd investigated the Texas refinery explosion. He typed out everything: the acoustic anomalies, the deleted logbook entries, the climbing pressure readings, the disabled safety systems. He attached photos, audio files, Sarah Chen's data. Then he stared at the send button, paralyzed by consequences. If he sent this email, Christine would know. She'd claim he violated company confidentiality. She'd enforce the separation agreement's penalties. She'd sue him for everything he had, and he had so little to lose that even nothing felt significant. But if he didn't send it and people died? Marcus's finger moved toward the keyboard, pulled back, moved forward again. At 11:43 p.m., he closed the laptop without sending anything. He checked on Emma one more time before attempting sleep. She lay sprawled across her bed, one arm thrown over her stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful in the specific way children's faces are peaceful when they still believe their parents can protect them from everything. Marcus adjusted her a blanket, kissed her forehead, and whispered words she couldn't hear. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. In his own bedroom, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him. Somewhere across town, Riverside Manufacturing ran its night shift. Somewhere in that complex, Sector 4 breathed and strained. Somewhere in those pipes, pressure built with mathematical inevitability. And somewhere in an office or a house or a car, Christine Novak was making decisions that would echo through lives she'd never meet, destroying futures she couldn't imagine, all in service of abstractions like efficiency and competitiveness and market positioning. At 12:17 a.m., Marcus's phone lit up with a text from Sarah Chen. 151 PSI, God help us. He typed back, get out of there, please. Her response came instantly. Can't. If I abandon my post, I'll be fired. Better fired than dead. Easy for you to say. You don't have $80,000 in student loans. The conversation ended there. Marcus stared at the screen, watching the timestamp advance. 12:19, 12:20, 12:21. Each minute bringing Riverside closer to whatever awaited at the end of Christine's calculated risks. He thought about his father, who'd worked this same plant for 30 years without a single serious incident. His father, who taught Marcus that the measure of a man wasn't what he did when people were watching, but what he did when no one would ever know. At 12:47 a.m., Marcus made a decision that would either save lives or destroy what remained of his own. He got dressed in the dark, moving quietly to avoid waking Emma. He wrote a note. Emergency at work. Mrs. Patterson will be here when you wake up. Love you more than anything. And left it on the kitchen table. He called his neighbor, apologizing for the late hour, asking if she could come sit with Emma. Mrs. Patterson, bless her, asked no questions and arrived 12 minutes later in her bathrobe. Then Marcus grabbed his toolbox, climbed into his truck, and drove toward Riverside Manufacturing with the cold certainty that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. The Riverside Manufacturing parking lot held maybe a dozen vehicles at 1:14 a.m., the skeleton crew who kept production running while the rest of Bridgeport slept. Marcus parked 3 blocks away, in the lot of a closed auto parts store, and approached on foot. The November air bit through his jacket, carrying the chemical tang of industrial processes that never stopped. even when they should. Building C's employee entrance showed no signs of life. The security camera above the door hung at the same useless angle it had maintained for months. Budget cuts claiming another victim, leaving a blind spot big enough to drive a truck through. Marcus waited for the hourly patrol to pass, Tom Granger making his rounds with the methodical pace of a man counting down to retirement, then slipped inside during the gap between surveillance sweeps. The corridors at night felt different, shadows deeper, sounds amplified by emptiness. His work boots echoed off concrete floors, each step a potential alarm. He moved through maintenance passages he'd walked thousands of times, now transformed into hostile territory, where his presence meant trespassing, breaking and entering, a dozen charges Christine's lawyers could weaponize. Sector 4's access door stood propped open with a maintenance cart, some night shift workers' shortcut that violated a half-dozen safety protocols. Marcus sent a silent thanks to whoever had been too lazy to pull the door shut properly and stepped into the pressure system's domain. The whistle hit him immediately, no longer subtle, no longer at the edge of perception. The sound filled the space like a living thing, 80,500 hertz of metal screaming. Anyone with functional hearing should have evacuated the building. Instead, production continued. The deep bass rumble of equipment operating at capacity, drowning out warnings that required attention to notice. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the audio recording app, and captured 30 seconds of the acoustic signature. Evidence if he survived to present it. Then he approached the main gauge, knowing what he'd find but hoping he was wrong. 157 psi, 3 points above critical threshold. The needle didn't flutter anymore. It oscillated wildly, swinging 5 degrees in either direction. A mechanical seizure that screamed malfunction to anyone who understood pressure dynamics. He checked his watch, 1:22 a.m., pulled out his phone, pulled up Sarah Chen's number, and texted, "Where are you right now?" The response came instantly, like she'd been waiting. "Control room, watching the readings climb." "Where are you?" Sector 4, looking at 157 psi on the main gauge. "Why hasn't automatic shutdown triggered?" "Because Christine's override is still active. System thinks this is maintenance flexibility." Marcus felt rage and fear compete for dominance in his chest. "Get everyone out of sectors 3, 4, and 5. Pull the fire alarm if you have to." "I can't. Robert's here. He'll report me." "Sarah, this system is minutes from catastrophic failure. Your job won't matter if you're dead." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'm going to the restroom. Going to trip a circuit breaker on the way. Maybe that will trigger evacuation protocols. Be careful. You too." Marcus moved deeper into Sector 4, toward the main pressure manifold where 6 major lines converged. His phone's flashlight beam caught details invisible in normal lighting. Stress discoloration on welds, hairline cracks in pipe surfaces, condensation patterns that indicated temperature differentials the system wasn't designed to handle. At the central junction, he found what he'd been dreading. The primary relief valve, the last mechanical failsafe before catastrophic rupture, showed fresh paint. Someone had covered it recently, probably to hide the fact that it hadn't been serviced in months. Marcus chipped at the paint with a pocket knife, exposing the valve handle beneath. Seized solid. Years of neglect had fused the mechanism, rendering it inoperable. If pressure continued climbing, this valve was supposed to open automatically, bleeding off excess before disaster struck. Instead, it would sit frozen while physics worked its inevitable conclusion. Marcus braced against the nearest support beam, wrapped both hands around the valve handle, and pulled with everything he had. Metal groaned but didn't move. He tried again, muscles burning, vision tunneling from effort. Nothing. His phone buzzed. "Diego." "Marcus, what the hell are you doing here? Security just saw you on internal cameras." "How long before they arrive?" 5 minutes, maybe less." "I need 10. For what?" "To prevent a disaster Christine refuses to acknowledge." Diego's voice dropped to a whisper, probably hiding in some maintenance closet. "Bro, they're going to arrest you. This is breaking and entering." "I know what it is. Where's the manual pressure release for this sector?" A pause, then, "Maintenance sublevel, access tunnel below Sector 4. But Marcus, that tunnel, if something ruptures while you're down there." I know. Tell security I'm armed and dangerous. Buy me 5 more minutes. What? I'm not going to. Diego, 180 people are working above a bomb. I need time to defuse it. The line went dead. Marcus didn't know if Diego would actually delay security or if he'd just lost his last ally. But there was no time to debate. He found the maintenance access hatch, pulled it open, and descended into the sublevel tunnel. The temperature jumped 15 degrees immediately. Hot air rose from equipment that had run continuously for decades, turning the tunnel into a sauna. Marcus's flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness. 60 feet of cramped passage lined with secondary piping, junction boxes, and the skeletal infrastructure that kept surface systems operational. The whistle was louder down here, resonating through metal surfaces, building harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache. He moved forward in a crouch, the tunnel too low for standing, his toolbox scraping against walls. Halfway through, his phone buzzed again. Sarah Chen. Building-wide evacuation alarm just triggered. People are heading to parking lot. What did you do? Not me. Probably you when you hit that circuit breaker. Robert is freaking out. Christine's on her way. ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Marcus could work with that. He pushed forward, ignoring the heat, ignoring the screaming pressure systems above his head, focusing on the manual release valve that represented the last chance to prevent catastrophe. The valve appeared in his flashlight beam, a wheel mechanism 3 feet in diameter, painted safety orange, labeled with warnings about authorized personnel only. Marcus set down his toolbox, gripped the wheel with both hands, and pulled. Nothing. The wheel might as well have been welded in place. He tried again, putting his body weight into it, boots planted against the tunnel wall for leverage. The wheel moved, a quarter inch, maybe less, then stopped. Decades of disuse had created resistance that one man's strength couldn't overcome. Marcus pulled a penetrating lubricant from his toolbox, sprayed the valve mechanism until fluid dripped onto the tunnel floor, then waited 30 seconds he didn't have for chemistry to work. Above him, the pressure system's whistle reached a new pitch, a harmonic shriek that meant structural failure was imminent. He tried the wheel again. This time it moved, half an inch, distance breaking as frozen components reluctantly yielded. Marcus pulled harder, muscles screaming, vision going gray at the edges from exertion and heat. The wheel spun suddenly, resistance collapsing, and pressure exploded through the release valve. Steam erupted into the tunnel, superheated vapor filling the confined space instantly. Marcus threw himself backward, arms over his face, as 157 psi worth of pressure found its designated escape route. The roar was deafening. The heat was apocalyptic. Marcus pressed himself against the tunnel floor, making himself as small as possible, while the emergency release did exactly what it was designed to do, dump catastrophic pressure before it could destroy equipment and kill workers. The gauge on the tunnel wall, barely visible through steam, showed numbers dropping: 157, 149, 141, 133. The relief valve was working, bleeding off the excess that should never have been allowed to build in the first place. Marcus lay on the tunnel floor, hands blistered from steam exposure, lungs burning from superheated air, and waited for the pressure to drop into safe ranges. Around him, the steel infrastructure groaned and pinged, metal contracting as temperatures normalized, the entire system sighing with relief. At 125 psi, Marcus allowed himself to breathe. At a 118, he sat up, checking his hands for serious burns, second degree, painful but manageable. At 112, he began the crawl back toward the access hatch. Every movement an exercise in pain management. He emerged from the tunnel to find Sector 4 evacuated, emergency lights strobing, and Tom Granger standing 15 feet away with his hand on his radio. Tom's expression carried no hostility, only resignation. "Marcus, I have to call this in." "I know you do. They're going to press charges, breaking and entering at minimum, maybe more." "I know that too." Tom looked at the pressure gauges, now reading safely below critical thresholds, then back at Marcus. "But you did save everyone's asses. That's got to count for something." "Tell that to Christine." Sirens approached from outside, fire trucks, police cars, the cavalry arriving 15 minutes too late to do anything except document the aftermath. Marcus sat on the concrete floor, back against a support column, hands throbbing, and waited for the inevitable. The first responders arrived in waves. Fire Chief Anderson, 50-something, veteran of 30 years fighting industrial blazes, took one look at the Sector 4 pressure systems and started issuing orders. His team deployed with practiced efficiency, checking equipment, documenting conditions, treating the scene like the disaster that almost was. Anderson crouched beside Marcus, examining his hands with the clinical detachment of someone who had seen worse. "You the one who released the pressure?" "Yes, sir." "Probably saved a dozen lives, maybe more." He pulled a first aid kit from his belt, began wrapping Marcus's hands with gauze. This system was maybe 5 minutes from catastrophic rupture. You know what happens when pressure vessels fail at 157 psi? Explosion, shrapnel, probably takes out half the building. At least half, and everyone inside becomes collateral damage. Anderson finished wrapping the second hand. "So here's my question. Why was the automatic shutdown disabled?" "You'd have to ask management that." "Oh, I intend to." Anderson stood, offered Marcus a hand up. "For now, let's get you checked by paramedics. Those burns need proper treatment." The parking lot had become a triage center. 180 workers clustered in groups, confused and frightened, wondering why they'd been evacuated at 1:30 in the morning. Marcus spotted Diego among them, talking urgently with other mechanics, gesturing toward the building. Sarah Chen stood apart from the main crowd, arms wrapped around herself despite the jacket someone had draped over her shoulders. When she saw Marcus, relief flooded her face, immediately replaced by concern as she noticed his bandaged hands. She approached cautiously, aware that being seen together might draw attention neither of them wanted. "You're hurt." "I'm alive, so is everyone else." "Because of you. Because someone finally did what should have been done a week ago." Police Officer Rodriguez materialized beside them with the unfortunate timing of law enforcement. "Marcus Webb, that's me. I need to ask you some questions, starting with why you're on private property at 1:30 a.m. when you were terminated yesterday." Before Marcus could formulate a response that didn't sound like a confession, Christine Novak's Mercedes pulled into the parking lot at a speed that suggested either panic or fury. She emerged in business casual, slacks and a blouse hastily thrown on, hair loose around her shoulders instead of the usual severe bun, makeup absent. The corporate armor had cracked, revealing something human underneath. She took in the scene with swift efficiency. Fire trucks, police presence, evacuated workers, Marcus standing there with bandaged hands. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, understanding, rage, and something that might have been fear. Fire Chief Anderson intercepted her before she could reach Marcus. "Ms. Novak? I'm Fire Chief Anderson. I need to speak with you immediately about your facility's safety systems." "What happened? Why was evacuation ordered?" "Your Sector 4 pressure system nearly experienced catastrophic failure. We're talking 157 psi and equipment rated for 150 maximum. If this gentleman," he gestured toward Marcus, "hadn't manually released the pressure, we'd be looking at a major industrial accident right now." Christine's eyes found Marcus across the intervening space. Whatever she saw in his expression made her look away quickly. "That's impossible. Our monitoring systems would have triggered automatic shutdown at 1:55. "Your monitoring systems show a manual override dated November 4th, signed by you, allowing operation above safety thresholds for maintenance flexibility. Care to explain that decision?" The color drained from Christine's face. "That override was temporary, for a specific maintenance window. It should have been deactivated immediately after." "Well, it wasn't. And tonight it nearly cost you a building and everyone inside it." Raymond Caldwell's BMW arrived next, the owner moving with the stiff urgency of a man awakened by crisis. He looked older without the suit and tie, diminished somehow, just another tired man in his late 50s wondering how his legacy had turned to ashes. He surveyed the parking lot, the emergency vehicles, the workers who should have been safely running production instead of standing in the cold wondering if they still had jobs. When he spotted Marcus, something indefinable crossed his features. Shame, maybe, or the belated recognition of catastrophic error. Anderson addressed them both now, his voice carrying authority earned through decades of pulling bodies from industrial wreckage. I'm shutting this facility down pending a complete safety inspection. No one enters without my written authorization. And both of you, he looked from Christine to Raymond, will be answering questions from OSHA, the State Safety Board, and quite possibly the district attorney. Christine found her voice, though it lacked its usual certainty. Fire Chief, I understand your concern, but shutting down production will cost. I don't care what it costs. Anderson's tone could have frozen nitrogen. 4 workers died in Kentucky yesterday because management made the same calculations you're making right now. I will not have that happen in my jurisdiction. This facility is closed until I'm satisfied it won't kill anyone. Raymond spoke for the first time since arriving, his voice carrying the hollow quality of a man watching his life's work collapse. How long are we talking? However long it takes. Days, weeks, months, depends what we find during inspection. Anderson turned to Marcus. Mr. Webb, I'm going to need a detailed statement about what you observed, what actions you took, and why you felt manual intervention was necessary. He's trespassing, Christine interjected, desperately grasping for some form of control. He was fired yesterday and had no authorization to be on this property. He also prevented a disaster that would have made national news, Anderson shot back. I'm not particularly interested in your employment disputes when we're standing in the shadow of what almost became a mass casualty event. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Chief, I still need to address the trespassing issue. Private property laws don't have an exception for heroic gestures. Anderson looked at Rodriguez with the particular exasperation of one emergency responder dealing with another's bureaucratic constraints. Write him a citation if you must, but I want his statement on record first, because his observations are going to be crucial for the investigation. More vehicles arrived, news vans attracted by scanner traffic and the promise of industrial drama. Reporters emerged with cameras and microphones, drawn to crisis the way sharks smell blood. Marcus watched them set up, knowing his face would be on local news by dawn, his name attached to whatever narrative sold the most advertising. Diego approached cautiously, checking whether proximity to Marcus remained safe or if association would contaminate by extension. Man, they're saying you broke in and manually released the pressure. Is that true? Yeah. Why, you had to know they'd press charges. The question deserved honesty. Because sitting at home while people died wasn't an option I could live with. Diego absorbed that, weighing it against his own choices, his own compromises. The guys want you to know, everyone working tonight, we all know what you did. That counts for something. It counts for exactly nothing in court. Maybe, but it counts where it matters. Sarah Chen materialized on Marcus's other side, her presence an act of quiet solidarity. I documented everything. 6 months of pressure data, the deleted logbook entries, Christine's override command. I sent it all to my personal email before the system locked me out. They'll say you stole proprietary information. Let them. Some things are more important than covering your ass. The 3 of them stood together, the fired mechanic, the terrified technician, the conflicted friend, united by the shared understanding that choosing principles over paychecks carried costs none of them could truly afford. Christine approached, her corporate composure reassembling like armor after a breach. She addressed Marcus with the careful neutrality of someone performing for an audience. Mr. Webb, I need to understand what you observed tonight that made you feel intervention was necessary. You read my report yesterday. Nothing's changed except the pressure got worse. I'm asking for a professional assessment, not a personal grievance. The audacity of that statement, reframing 12 years of expertise as personal grudge, nearly broke Marcus's last reserves of civility. You want a professional assessment? Fine. Your facility's Sector 4 pressure system was operating at 157 psi when I arrived, 12 points above critical threshold. The primary relief valve is seized from lack of maintenance. The automatic shutdown you claim should have triggered was disabled by an override you authorized. The acoustic signature indicates imminent structural failure, not tomorrow, not next week, but within minutes. I manually released pressure because waiting for management approval would have meant body bags. Christine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You had no authority to make that decision. No, I had the competence. Authority and competence aren't always distributed to the same people. Raymond Caldwell, who'd been listening with increasing discomfort, finally intervened. Christine, perhaps this conversation should wait until we've consulted with legal counsel. What needs legal counsel? Mr. Webb committed criminal trespass and tampered with industrial equipment without authorization. That's straightforward. He also prevented what Chief Anderson is calling a near-catastrophic failure, Raymond countered, and for a moment Marcus glimpsed the man who'd built Riverside Manufacturing 3 decades ago, before age and compromise had worn away the edges. Maybe we should focus on understanding how we got to a point where a terminated employee felt compelled to risk arrest to keep his former coworkers alive. The question hung in the November air, demanding answers no one present wanted to provide. The reporters had moved close enough to catch fragments of conversation, cameras recording whatever drama played out under emergency lights. Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat, drawing attention back to immediate legalities. Mr. Webb, I'm issuing you a citation for criminal trespass. You'll need to appear in court within 30 days to answer the charge. Do you understand? I understand. Additionally, Ms. Novak, if you wish to press charges for property damage or equipment tampering, you'll need to file a formal complaint. Christine looked at the assembled crowd, workers who'd been evacuated, reporters who were filming, emergency responders who'd used words like heroic intervention. The calculation played out across her features. Prosecuting the man who'd prevented disaster would be terrible optics, but letting him walk set a dangerous precedent about authority and chain of command. She chose the path of bureaucratic delay. I'll need to review the full situation with our legal team before making that decision, which meant yes, but not tonight, not with cameras recording. The crowd began to disperse as the immediate crisis faded into administrative aftermath. Workers were sent home for the remainder of the shift, promised updates about when production might resume. Emergency vehicles departed one by one. They were work complete now that disaster had been converted to mere incident. Marcus found himself sitting on the bumper of a fire truck, hands throbbing despite the painkillers the paramedics had provided, exhaustion settling into his bones with the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. Diego sat beside him, neither speaking. Just 2 men processing the night's events in the shared silence of those who'd survived something together. Sarah Chen approached with coffee from somewhere, steam rising in the pre-dawn cold. I called OSHA, filed an official complaint about the safety violations, the deleted logbook entries, all of it. There's going to be a full investigation. You know that makes you a whistleblower, Marcus pointed out. Christine will retaliate. Probably. But I'm not spending the next 30 years wondering if my silence helped kill someone. She handed Marcus the coffee, her hands trembling slightly. Besides, I can't be the only one who sees what's wrong here. Someone has to say it out loud. Diego shifted uncomfortably, caught between agreement and self-preservation. What happens now? To the company? To all of us? Marcus sipped the coffee, terrible break-room brew that tasted like hope and desperation. Best case? OSHA finds violations, levies fines, forces upgrades. Riverside reopens in a few months with better safety systems. Worst case? They find criminal negligence, shut the place down permanently, 180 people looking for work in a town that doesn't have much to offer. And you? What happens to you? Court appearance for trespassing. Probably a fine I can't afford. Maybe jail time if Christine pushes hard enough. Marcus looked at his bandaged hands. But Emma's safe, you guys are safe, and I can live with the consequences of that. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, black fading to charcoal to the pale gray of November dawn. Marcus's phone showed 4:47 a.m. Emma would wake in 2 hours, find his note, wonder why her father had vanished in the middle of the night to fight battles that weren't technically his anymore. Diego stood, stretching stiff muscles. I should get home before Maria sends out search parties, but Marcus, thank you. For caring when you didn't have to. I always have to, that's the problem. After Diego left, Sarah remained, perched on the fire truck bumper like a bird uncertain of flight paths. Mr. Webb, can I ask you something? Marcus, and sure. How did you know? Did you know? I mean, really know, not just suspect. The pressure readings were elevated but still technically in range. The gauges weren't screaming danger. How did you have the certainty to risk everything? Marcus considered the question, reaching for words to explain instinct developed over 12 years of listening to machines speak their language of stress and failure. You know how musicians can hear when an instrument is out of tune, even if it's just a few hertz off? That's what industrial equipment sounds like to me. I've spent so long listening to normal that abnormal registers immediately, even when instruments say otherwise. Tonight, Sector 4 was screaming. The whistle, the pressure oscillations, the way metal responds when it's about to fail. I didn't need instruments to tell me disaster was coming. I could hear it. But what if you'd been wrong? What if the system had stabilized on its own and you just created chaos for nothing? Then I'd be exactly where I am now, facing charges, out of work, struggling to explain to my daughter why principles cost more than wisdom suggests they should. The potential outcomes for being wrong versus being right aren't symmetrical, Sarah. If I'm wrong and act anyway, worst case is professional embarrassment. If I'm right and don't act, worst case is people die. That's not a hard calculation. Sarah processed that, her expressions suggesting she was measuring her own choices against that framework. You're either the bravest person I've met or the most foolish. Probably both. They're not mutually exclusive. She stood, wrapping her jacket tighter against the cold. For what it's worth, I hope the judge sees it your way. Me too, but I'm not optimistic about the justice system's ability to distinguish between technical violations and moral necessities. Alone now, Marcus watched the sun climb over Bridgeport's industrial skyline, painting smokestacks in shades of amber and rust. The night shift that never completed its work had become morning, and somewhere across town, Emma was waking to find her father gone, and only questions to greet her. He pulled out his phone, typed a text to Mrs. Patterson. On my way home, sorry for the chaos, we'll explain everything. Her response came immediately. Emma's still asleep, take your time. You did good, Marcus. How she knew what he'd done, he couldn't guess. Probably the local news, already running stories about the near miss at Riverside Manufacturing. Small towns had few secrets, and heroic gestures even fewer. The parking lot had emptied entirely now, leaving Marcus alone with his battered truck and the wreckage of a career he'd deliberately sacrificed. He climbed behind the wheel, hands protesting every movement, and started the engine. The drive home took 12 minutes, during which Marcus's mind refused to settle on any single thought. Instead, it cycled through consequences and next steps. Find employment, attend court, explain to Emma why doing the right thing sometimes looks identical to making terrible decisions. Mrs. Patterson met him at the door, her grandmotherly face creased with concern. Lord have mercy, Marcus, what happened to your hands? Steam burns, nothing serious. You're a terrible liar. She ushered him inside, maternal instincts overriding any sense of professional distance. Emma's been asking about you every 10 minutes since she woke up. I told her you had an emergency at work. Close enough to the truth. Emma appeared in the hallway, stole in her pajamas, eyes wide with questions she didn't know how to ask. Marcus knelt, painful with burned hands and exhausted muscles, and opened his arms. She ran into them with the fierce certainty of 7-year-olds whose fathers are still invincible, despite mounting evidence otherwise. Daddy, your hands! Just a little accident, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about. She pulled back, examining his face with the intensity children develop when their worlds feel unstable. Did you keep people safe? The question deserved honesty. I tried my best. That's all anyone can do. Then you did good. She hugged him again, small arms providing structural support his spine desperately needed. Mrs. Patterson made her exit with tactful efficiency, leaving father and daughter to navigate whatever conversations morning demanded. Marcus carried Emma to the couch, settling into familiar cushions with relief that felt almost spiritual. Daddy, are we in trouble? I might be. You're fine. What kind of trouble? How to explain criminal trespass and industrial safety violations to a second grader. The kind where I did something necessary but not exactly legal, and now I have to explain to a judge why the necessity outweighed the legality. Emma processed that with her characteristic seriousness. Like when I took a cookie before dinner because Billy Morrison said he was going to take the last one and I knew you wanted it? Despite everything, Marcus smiled. Something like that, except with bigger consequences than a timeout. Will you go to jail? I hope not, but we'll figure it out either way. She curled against his side, fitting perfectly in the space under his arm. Daddy, I'm proud of you. Even if you get in trouble, Mommy would be proud too. The words landed with unexpected force, opening emotional fissures Marcus had been carefully avoiding. He kissed the top of Emma's head, breathing in strawberry shampoo and the particular scent of his daughter, and let himself believe that maybe, despite trespassing charges and unemployment and financial ruin, he'd made choices Sarah would have understood. Outside, Bridgeport woke to news of the near disaster at Riverside Manufacturing, to questions about safety and oversight, and whether profits should ever outweigh human lives. Inside Marcus Webb's small house, a father and daughter sat together on a worn couch, survivors of a night that could have ended so much worse, facing an uncertain future with nothing but each other and the stubborn conviction that some things still mattered more than expedience. The phone rang, unknown number. Marcus answered cautiously. A woman's voice, professional and direct. Mr. Webb, this is Elizabeth Morrison, Corporate Safety Director. I've been following the situation at Riverside Manufacturing. I'd like to discuss a position with my consulting firm. Are you available to talk? Marcus looked at Emma, who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder, exhausted by worry. He looked at his bandaged hands, at the living room that needed repairs he couldn't afford, at the stack of bills that represented obligations he could no longer meet. Then he looked at himself in the hallway mirror, battered, burned, unemployed, and possibly headed for jail, but still standing, still breathing, still able to meet his own eyes without flinching. Yes, Marcus said into the phone, choosing forward motion over paralysis. I'm available to talk. Elizabeth Morrison's office occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in downtown Pittsburgh, 90 miles from Bridgeport, but worlds apart in professional atmosphere. Marcus arrived 48 hours after the Riverside incident, hands still bandaged, wearing the only suit he owned, purchased for Sarah's funeral 3 years ago and unworn since. The receptionist, efficient and impersonal, directed him to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Allegheny River. Elizabeth entered precisely at 10 a.m., carrying a tablet and the purposeful energy of someone who'd spent 30 years navigating industrial disasters. She was 52, gray hair cut short, wearing practical slacks and a blazer that suggested competence over fashion. Her handshake was firm despite Marcus's obvious discomfort. Mr. Webb, thank you for making the drive. How are the hands? Healing. Second-degree burns aren't pleasant, but they could have been worse. Everything about that night could have been worse. She gestured to the chairs. I've been reviewing the OSHA preliminary report. Your intervention prevented what their engineers estimate would have been a Class 4 explosion affecting a 300-yard radius. 17 buildings in that radius, Mr. Webb. Residential neighborhoods. A elementary school. Marcus hadn't considered the broader geography. He'd focused on the 180 workers inside Riverside, not the thousands living adjacent to an industrial facility operating with compromised safety systems. Elizabeth continued, pulling up documents on her tablet. I've investigated 43 industrial accidents in my career. Pennsylvania, Texas, Louisiana, Ohio. Same pattern repeating with minor variations. Management prioritizes production over maintenance. Warning signs get ignored. Workers who raise concerns get marginalized or terminated. Then physics catches up and people die. She looked at Marcus directly. You broke that pattern. That's rare enough to be remarkable. I just did what needed doing. No, you did what was right despite every incentive pulling you toward inaction. There's a difference. She slid a folder across the table. I run a consulting firm specializing in industrial safety audits. We're hired by companies post-incident, or by smart ones trying to prevent incidents. I need people with your particular combination of technical expertise and moral backbone. People who won't compromise when pressure, literal or metaphorical, starts building. Marcus opened the folder. The contract inside specified salary, benefits, travel requirements, and expectations that seemed almost surreal compared to his mechanic wages. This is more than double what I made at Riverside. It's market rate for consultants with your experience, plus hazard pay for sites where conditions are questionable. Elizabeth leaned back, assessing him. I won't lie, this work is demanding. You'll spend weeks away from home, inspecting facilities that don't particularly want you there, writing reports that make powerful people uncomfortable. But you'll also prevent disasters before they happen. That count for anything with you? It counts for everything. Then we have alignment. I need your answer by end of week. Take time to discuss with your daughter, review the terms, whatever due diligence you require. Marcus thought about Emma, about Mrs. Patterson's kindness that couldn't extend indefinitely, about mortgage payments and medical debts and the court appearance scheduled for next month. I don't need time. Yes. Elizabeth allowed herself a small smile. Fast decision maker. Good. We'll start paperwork Monday. Your first assignment will be a facility in Erie, chemical processing plant, similar equipment to Riverside. Owner's smart enough to request an audit before problems develop. You'll observe, learn our protocols, shadow my senior consultant for 2 weeks. Then, Harry, you're on your own. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, expectations, and the particular challenges of telling industrial managers their operations were dangerous. Elizabeth operated with the clinical precision of someone who'd perfected the art of delivering unwelcome truths, and Marcus absorbed every detail like gospel. As the meeting concluded, Elizabeth paused at the door. Mr. Webb, that trespassing charge you're facing, my firm retains excellent legal counsel for situations where doing the right thing creates legal complications. I'll have them reach out. I can't afford. It's covered under your employment agreement. Section 7, legal protection for work-related incidents. What happened at Riverside was work-related, even if you were technically terminated. My lawyers will argue public safety exception, necessity defense, whatever keeps you out of jail and available for employment. Marcus felt something unclench in his chest. Not relief exactly, but a reduction of pressure that had been building since Officer Rodriguez handed him that citation. Thank you. Thank me by being as stubborn about safety in your new role as you were at Riverside. The industry needs more people willing to burn bridges when bridges deserve burning. The drive back to Bridgeport felt different. Not quite hopeful, but less catastrophic. Marcus had employment, legal support, and a path forward that didn't require abandoning the principles that had cost him everything. Emma would still have food, housing, stability. The court case remained, but with competent lawyers and Elizabeth's resources, the outcome felt less predetermined. His phone rang as he merged onto Route 376. Diego's name appeared on the display. Hey, hermano, you still alive? Barely, just had a meeting in Pittsburgh. Got a job offer. Serious? Doing what? Safety consulting. Basically what I did at Riverside, except traveling to different facilities and getting paid 3 times as much. Diego whistled low. Damn. So you fall upward by doing the right thing? That's not how the world usually works. It's not falling upward. It's consequences that happen to be less catastrophic than expected. Still counts as a win in my book. Diego's voice dropped. Listen, things are getting weird here. OSHA showed up yesterday with a full investigation team. They've been interviewing everyone, going through records, taking measurements. Christine's lawyer won't talk to anyone without her attorney present. Raymond looks like he's aged 10 years. What about the workers? When does production resume? Fire chief says maybe 2 months minimum. They found so much deferred maintenance that fixing Sector 4 opened a can of worms. Now they're inspecting everything, finding problems in Sectors 2, 3, and 5. Management's trying to figure out if it's cheaper to fix the facility or sell for parts. Marcus processed that information, guilt and vindication competing for dominance. 180 people out of work because he'd forced a reckoning that management had been avoiding, but also 80 people alive because he'd prevented the alternative. Diego, if anyone asks, if OSHA wants to talk to me, I'm available. Anytime, any questions. They already asked for your contact info. Investigator named Patricia Reeves. Serious woman, doesn't smile, takes notes like she's writing the Bible. Good. The more thorough the investigation, the better. After hanging up, Marcus stopped at a diner outside Monroeville, ordered coffee and breakfast he didn't particularly want, and tried to organize thoughts that refused cooperation. The past 72 hours had contained more inflection points than most people experienced in years. Termination, near disaster, intervention, arrest, and now resurrection through Elizabeth Morrison's offer. His phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line, Riverside Manufacturing Investigation. Request for statement. Patricia Reeves, OSHA senior investigator, wanted a formal interview at Marcus's earliest convenience. The email listed 14 specific areas of inquiry, from maintenance protocols to management communications to the events of November 18th. Marcus responded immediately, offering any day, any time, complete cooperation. Another email arrived minutes later. Christine Novak's attorney requesting that Marcus refrain from making public statements about Riverside Manufacturing pending resolution of ongoing legal matters. The threat was implicit but clear. Talk to the media and face consequences. Marcus deleted the email without responding. Christine's lawyers could make whatever demands they wanted, but OSHA investigations weren't subject to non-disparagement agreements, and public safety trumped corporate reputation management. By the time Marcus reached Bridgeport, local news had moved beyond initial coverage into deeper investigation. A reporter had found the Kentucky explosion footage and was drawing explicit parallels. Same industry, same equipment, same warning signs ignored. The story was gaining regional attention, which meant pressure on Riverside's management was building exponentially. Mrs. Patterson met Marcus at the door again, having apparently adopted a semi-permanent role as Emma's supplementary guardian. Emma was at school, giving Marcus 3 hours to handle adult complications before resuming father responsibilities. "You look better than you did yesterday," Mrs. Patterson observed, ushering him inside. "Still exhausted, but better. Got a job offer, safety consulting position in Pittsburgh." Her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Marcus, that's wonderful. Doing what?" "Preventing what almost happened at Riverside from happening elsewhere. Apparently there's a market for people stubborn enough to fight management when management's wrong. There's always been a market for integrity, just not always a paycheck attached." She collected her purse, preparing to leave. "Emma's been asking questions I didn't know how to answer. About why you went back to the factory, what happens next, whether you're in trouble. She's scared, Marcus, even if she's trying to be brave about it." "I know. I'll talk to her when she gets home." "Good, because 7-year-olds need truth, even uncomfortable truth. They can handle more than we think." After Mrs. Patterson left, Marcus spent an hour on the phone with Elizabeth Morrison's legal team. The attorneys, a pair of partners from a firm that specialized in employment law and regulatory defense, outlined their strategy with the efficiency of people who'd navigated similar cases dozens of times. The trespassing charge would be challenged on public safety grounds. Pennsylvania law recognized a necessity defense for illegal acts committed to prevent greater harm. Their argument, Marcus's unauthorized entry prevented imminent disaster, making the trespass legally justified. Precedent existed, though case law was mixed. The property damage claims Christine might file were more complicated. Defense would argue Marcus's actions prevented vastly greater damage, making his intervention net positive from a financial perspective. But that required quantifying what didn't happen. Always a difficult sell to judges who dealt in concrete damages rather than prevented catastrophes. "Worst case scenario?" Marcus asked. The senior attorney, a woman named Rebecca Walsh, whose voice carried the particular weariness of someone who'd seen too many unjust outcomes, answered honestly. "Worst case, judge doesn't buy necessity defense. You're convicted of criminal trespass, sentenced to 30 days jail suspended, fine of $500, criminal record. That's if they push hard and everything breaks against us. Best case, charges dismissed on public safety grounds. Local prosecutor recognizing that prosecuting you creates terrible optics. Middle ground, plea deal to lesser charges, community service, no jail time. What do you recommend? Fight it. The facts are on your side. The morality is unquestionable. And juries tend to like people who risk arrest to save lives. Plus, frankly, Elizabeth wants this case as precedent. She's tired of watching good people get punished for doing necessary things." Marcus agreed to the strategy, signed the representation agreements, and spent the rest of the afternoon fielding calls from reporters who'd somehow obtained his number. He declined all interview requests, following Rebecca Walsh's advice to let the legal process unfold before providing ammunition to opponents. Emma returned from school with Mrs. Patterson at 3:15, carrying artwork and the particular energy of children who'd spent 7 hours trying to focus while worrying about home. She hugged Marcus with desperate intensity, then pulled back to examine his face. "You look less tired, Daddy." "I got some good news today. Remember I mentioned finding a new job? It's official now." Her expression shifted through several emotions: relief, uncertainty, cautious optimism. "What kind of job?" "Safety consultant. I'll travel to factories and help them fix problems before people get hurt. Like what I did at Riverside, except at lots of different places." "Will you be gone a lot?" The question cut deeper than Emma probably intended. "Sometimes, but not overnight unless absolutely necessary, and never more than a few days. You're still the most important thing, sweetheart." She processed that, weighing promises against history, adult words against childhood fears. "Can I come visit sometimes? See what you do?" "When you're older, maybe. These aren't places for kids right now." Emma nodded, accepting limits she didn't fully understand. "Daddy, are you still in trouble with the police?" Honesty felt essential. "Yes, I have to go to court next month to explain why I went back to the factory, but I have good lawyers now, and they think the judge will understand." "What if the judge doesn't understand?" "Then I deal with consequences. But Em, even if things get difficult, I need you to know something. I made the choice I could live with. Sometimes being right costs more than being wrong, but the cost of being wrong about safety is too high to accept." She tilted her head, considering that philosophy with her characteristic seriousness. "Is that what Mommy meant when she said you always did the hard thing?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what she meant." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, training, and preparation. Marcus started at Elizabeth Morrison's firm on a Monday, spending his first week in orientation, learning documentation protocols, understanding legal frameworks, studying case histories of industrial accidents and the warning signs that preceded them. The work was intellectually demanding in ways mechanics rarely experienced. Instead of fixing immediate problems, Marcus learned to identify systemic issues, trace root causes, predict failure modes before they manifested. It was chess instead of checkers, strategy instead of tactics. His second week involved shadowing Thomas Brennan, a senior consultant 20 years Marcus's senior, during an audit of a chemical processing plant in Erie. Thomas operated with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen enough disasters to know exactly what subtle details predicted catastrophe. "See that valve assembly?" Thomas pointed to a junction in the facility's pressure system. "Paint's flaking near the seals. Not visible to casual inspection, but it tells you the seals are leaking slightly. Heat from escaped vapor is degrading the paint. Flag it for replacement within 30 days. Marcus absorbed every lesson, every technique, every hard-won insight Thomas shared. By week's end, he'd identified 17 potential safety issues the plant operators hadn't recognized, earning Thomas's grudging approval. "You've got the instinct," Thomas acknowledged during the drive back to Pittsburgh. "Most consultants learn this intellectually. Read the manuals, memorize the regulations, check boxes. You feel it. That's rare. 12 years of listening to machines helped. It's not just listening, it's caring enough to hear what they're saying. Half this job is technical knowledge. The other half is giving enough of a damn to use that knowledge even when it's inconvenient." Marcus thought about Christine Novak, about Raymond Caldwell, about all the managers he'd encounter who valued quarterly earnings over worker safety. What happens when clients don't want to hear our findings? Then we document everything, deliver our report, and move on. Can't force people to care, Marcus. All we can do is make sure they can't claim ignorance when things go wrong. The OSHA investigation at Riverside concluded in early December with preliminary findings that made regional news. Patricia Reeves held a press conference in Harrisburg, delivering conclusions with prosecutorial precision. "Our investigation identified systematic safety violations spanning 18 months. Management disabled critical safety systems, ignored repeated worker concerns, and deferred maintenance to unsustainable levels. The November 18th near catastrophe was not an isolated incident, but the predictable outcome of chronic negligence. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. Reeves continued undeterred. "We're recommending criminal charges against management for willful violation of safety regulations. Additionally, Riverside Manufacturing faces $2.3 million in civil penalties. The facility will remain closed until comprehensive repairs are completed and new safety protocols are implemented under direct OSHA supervision." The camera cut to Raymond Caldwell's attorney delivering a prepared statement about cooperation and commitment to worker safety, words that rang hollow after Reeves's testimony. Christine Novak was notably absent, apparently having resigned her position the previous week. Marcus watched the press conference from Elizabeth Morrison's office, where the firm had gathered to monitor developments. Elizabeth turned off the television as Reeves concluded, "That's the outcome we hope for but rarely get. Actual accountability." She looked at Marcus. "You should feel proud. Your actions force this investigation, and this investigation will prevent similar disasters at other facilities. OSHA is going to use Riverside as a case study, what happens when warnings get ignored, and what intervention looks like when someone refuses to stay silent. I just wish it hadn't required near disaster to create change. Welcome to industrial safety. We're always one incident away from reform, always fighting to prevent tragedies that haven't happened yet. It's frustrating, exhausting, and occasionally heartbreaking, but it matters." Diego called that evening with updates from the ground level. Management's completely restructured. Raymond's out. Board forced him to retire. They brought in some turnaround specialists to salvage what's left. Word is they might sell to a larger manufacturer who can afford the repairs. What about the workers? Most found temporary positions elsewhere. Some talking about not coming back even when Riverside reopens. Trust is pretty much destroyed. Sarah Chen left for a position in Cleveland, something with better pay and actual safety protocols. She wanted me to tell you thanks, by the way. Said you showed her what courage looked like. Marcus felt complicated emotions about that. Pride mixed with guilt that courage had been necessary at all. "And you, what are you doing?" "Still here, working reduced hours while repairs happen. Maria's shop is doing better, so we're okay financially. But Marcus, I keep thinking, what would have happened if you hadn't come back that night? Would I have had the guts to shut things down myself? Or would I have just kept working while pressure built?" You can't answer hypotheticals like that, Diego. You make decisions with the information and options available at the time. Maybe, but I know myself well enough to admit I probably would have waited for someone else to make the hard choice. That's a difficult thing to acknowledge. The conversation left Marcus unsettled, confronting the reality that moral courage was never evenly distributed. Some people had capacity for principled stands. Others prioritized survival, and most existed somewhere between those extremes. Judging Diego felt hypocritical when Marcus himself had benefited from circumstances. No dependence beyond Emma, no immigrant status to risk, no vulnerability that made resistance unbearably costly. His court date arrived on December 15th, a gray Tuesday morning that matched Marcus's mood. Rebecca Walsh met him outside the Bridgeport County Courthouse, flanked by her partner and carrying 3 accordion folders of documentation. "Remember what we discussed," she instructed as they climbed the courthouse steps. "Answer questions directly. Don't volunteer extra information. Maintain composure regardless of what the prosecutor says. Judge Harrington is fair, but by the book. She'll respect facts and sincerity." The courtroom was surprisingly full. Workers from Riverside occupied the gallery, having apparently organized to show support. Diego was there, Sarah Chen having driven down from Cleveland, even Tom Granger in his security guard uniform. Their presence felt simultaneously comforting and pressuring, a reminder that this case had implications beyond Marcus's personal circumstances. Christine Novak sat in the back row alone, looking diminished without her corporate armor. Their eyes met briefly, some complex communication passing between them that Marcus couldn't fully parse. Regret, maybe, or acknowledgement that they'd both made choices with consequences, neither fully anticipated. The prosecutor, a young assistant DA named Michael Torres, who looked fresh out of law school, presented the state's case with more enthusiasm than expertise. Marcus had committed criminal trespass, unauthorized entry to private property with clear signage prohibiting access. Intent was irrelevant. The law prohibited unauthorized entry regardless of motivation. Rebecca Walsh's defense focused on necessity doctrine, the principle that illegal acts became justified when committed to prevent imminent harm. She called Fire Chief Anderson first, who testified about the severity of the situation he'd found, the proximity to catastrophic failure, the lives saved by Marcus's intervention. In your professional opinion, Chief Anderson, what would have occurred if Mr. Webb had not manually released that pressure? Anderson's response carried the weight of 30 years fighting industrial fires. Catastrophic rupture of the primary pressure vessel, subsequent explosion affecting approximately 300 yards, structural failure of at least 2 buildings, probable fatalities in double digits, plus environmental contamination, infrastructure damage, potential secondary explosions. Conservative estimate, $50 million in damages and between 15 and 30 deaths. Torres tried to undermine Anderson's testimony during cross-examination, suggesting the threat wasn't as imminent as claimed, but Anderson remained unshakable. Son, I've pulled bodies from industrial accidents for 3 decades. I know what imminent disaster looks like, and November 18th qualified. Patricia Reeves testified next, walking through OSHA's investigation findings. The disabled safety systems, the deleted logbook entries, the management override that eliminated automatic shutdown, each detail built the case that Marcus had acted in a genuine emergency that management had deliberately ignored. Mr. Webb's technical assessment was accurate, Reeves concluded. The pressure system was operating 13 points above safe thresholds, with multiple backup systems disabled or non-functional. His intervention prevented what would have been one of Pennsylvania's worst industrial accidents in decades. During the lunch recess, Marcus stepped outside for air. Emma was at school, spared from watching her father on trial, but Mrs. Patterson had come to observe, sitting in the gallery with the quiet dignity of someone who'd seen enough life to recognize integrity when it appeared. She found Marcus on the courthouse steps. "You're doing fine. The judge is listening. Really listening, not just going through motions." Rebecca says that's good, but I can't read Harrington's face. Could go either way. Then we trust the process and accept whatever comes. Mrs. Patterson patted his arm with grandmotherly assurance. Emma wanted me to give you this. She handed Marcus a folded piece of construction paper. Inside, Emma had drawn a picture. Stick figures representing Marcus and herself, with "My dad is a hero" written in careful second-grade penmanship. Below, she'd added, "Even if the judge doesn't understand." Marcus felt his eyes burn, the drawing more valuable than any legal vindication. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket, armor against whatever verdict waited. The afternoon session featured Marcus's own testimony. Rebecca walked him through the events of November 18th with methodical precision. The phone call from Sarah Chen, the decision to intervene, the discovery of elevated pressure readings, the manual release valve operation. "Mr. Webb, why didn't you call emergency services instead of entering the facility yourself?" "Because emergency response would have taken 15 to 20 minutes, and the pressure dynamics suggested failure within 5 to 10. By the time professionals arrived, there wouldn't have been anyone left to rescue." Torres's cross-examination attempted to paint Marcus as a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge through sabotage, but the narrative fell apart under scrutiny. Marcus's calm responses and technical explanations made clear he'd acted from expertise rather than emotion. "Isn't it true you were angry about being terminated?" "Disappointed, yes. Angry, no. My feelings about employment were irrelevant when lives were at stake." "But you could have contacted OSHA, let proper authorities handle the situation." "OSHA's emergency response time is 3 to 5 business days. I had minutes, not days. When you see a car about to hit a child, you don't file a report with the Department of Transportation. You pull the child out of the road." Judge Harrington, who'd remained largely impassive throughout the trial, leaned forward slightly at that analogy. Marcus couldn't tell if he'd scored points or committed some rhetorical error. Closing arguments consumed 90 minutes. Torres emphasized the letter of the law. Trespass was trespass. Good intentions didn't override property rights. Allowing necessity defense opened doors to vigilante justice. Rebecca countered with the spirit of justice. Laws existed to protect people, not to punish those who prevented disasters, and any legal framework that criminalized life-saving intervention needed examining. Judge Harrington called a 30-minute recess to consider her verdict. Marcus spent that half hour in the hallway, surrounded by supporters who offered encouragement he couldn't fully absorb. His mind had moved beyond the immediate verdict to larger questions about justice, morality, and whether legal systems could accommodate the messy reality of crisis decisions. When court reconvened, Harrington's expression remained neutral as she addressed the room. This case presents a conflict between property rights and public safety, between legal procedure and moral imperative. The law is clear that unauthorized entry to private property constitutes criminal trespass. However, the law also recognizes that extraordinary circumstances can justify otherwise illegal acts. She paused, reviewing notes, while everyone in the courtroom held their collective breath. The evidence presented demonstrates that Mr. Webb possessed genuine expertise to assess the danger, that the threat was imminent and severe, that no reasonable alternative existed, and that his actions directly prevented catastrophic harm. The necessity defense, while rarely invoked successfully, exists precisely for situations like this. Marcus felt Diego's hand grip his shoulder, but couldn't fully process what he was hearing. Therefore, I find Mr. Webb not guilty of criminal trespass. His actions, while technically illegal, were justified by the emergency circumstances and the absence of viable alternatives. Charges dismissed. The courtroom erupted in applause, which Harrington quickly gavelled down, but her small smile suggested she didn't entirely disapprove. Rebecca Walsh shook Marcus's hand with professional satisfaction. Torres packed his briefcase with the resignation of someone who'd lost but hadn't particularly wanted to win, and workers from Riverside crowded forward to offer congratulations. Christine Novak remained in her back row seat, watching the celebration with an expression Marcus couldn't decode. As people began filing out, she approached him with visible reluctance. "Mr. Webb, congratulations." Ms. Novak. Silence stretched between them, loaded with 18 months of conflict in one night of crisis. Finally, Christine spoke, her voice lacking its usual corporate polish. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the corporate version my attorneys would approve. You were right about Sector 4. You were right about the safety concerns. And I let my ambition and my fear of failure override judgment I should have trusted." Marcus studied her face, seeing exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. "What happens now, for you?" "I resigned from Riverside. I'm enrolling in a different kind of program, safety management certification, learning from people like Elizabeth Morrison how to do this job without compromising principles for profit. It doesn't undo my mistakes, but maybe it prevents future ones. That's something. It's not enough, but it's what I can offer." She extended her hand. "Thank you for not letting me kill people with my incompetence." The handshake was brief, awkward, but genuine. Marcus watched her leave the courthouse, wondering if people could truly change, or if crisis just revealed character that was always present beneath professional facades. Outside, December afternoon had turned the sky the color of old pewter. Emma would be home from school in 2 hours, and Marcus could finally tell her the court case was resolved, the judge understood, they were moving forward instead of backward. Elizabeth Morrison called as Marcus reached his truck, her voice carrying satisfaction. "Rebecca told me, not guilty, that's the outcome we wanted. Feels more like relief than victory. In our line of work, relief is victory. You are clear to start taking solo assignments now. First one's in Youngstown, Ohio. Steel processing facility with some concerning maintenance practices. Owner's cooperative, but needs outside perspective. You leave Monday." "I'll be ready." "I know you will be. Marcus, welcome to the fight. It's going to be exhausting and frustrating and sometimes heartbreaking. But you'll prevent disasters no one will ever know didn't happen, and that's its own reward." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his truck for several minutes processing the day's events. The court case was finished, employment secured, Emma's stability protected. But Riverside remained closed, 180 workers displaced, and an entire community was grappling with the reality that the factory they trusted had been operating on borrowed time. He drove home slowly, watching Bridgeport pass outside his windows, the shuttered storefronts, the workers leaving shift at the remaining factories, the neighborhoods where families tried to build lives around industrial employment that always felt one crisis away from vanishing. Mrs. Patterson had Emma in the kitchen when Marcus arrived, the two of them making cookies with the focused intensity children bring to projects involving chocolate chips. Emma looked up as Marcus entered, reading his face with practiced skill. "You're smiling, Daddy. That's good, right?" "That's very good, sweetheart. The judge said I didn't do anything wrong." She dropped her mixing spoon and ran to him, wrapping arms around his waist. "I knew she would understand because you're the best daddy and you keep people safe." Marcus lifted her up, getting harder as she grew but not yet impossible, and held on perhaps longer than the moment required. "I love you, Em, more than anything in this world." "I love you too. Can we have cookies now?" "We can absolutely have cookies now." That evening, after Emma went to bed and the house settled into nighttime quiet, Marcus stood at his bedroom window looking out at Bridgeport's industrial skyline. Somewhere in that landscape, factories continued operating, pressure systems continued cycling, workers continued trusting that someone was paying attention to safety. His phone showed an email from Diego. Photo attachment, no message. Marcus opened it to find an image of Sector 4's main pressure line, now undergoing comprehensive repair. New valves, replaced piping, modernized safety systems. Everything Marcus had recommended implementing months ago, finally being installed after near-disaster forced action. Another email arrived, this one from Sarah Chen. "Started my new position in Cleveland. They have actual safety protocols here, maintenance schedules that get followed, management that listens. It's strange working somewhere that treats safety as a feature instead of a bug. Thank you for showing me that places like this exist." Marcus composed responses to both, keeping them brief, avoiding the philosophical weight that threatened every interaction. Then he opened a new document and began drafting his first solo audit report for the Youngstown assignment, applying lessons learned from 12 years at Riverside and 3 weeks under Elizabeth Morrison's training. The work absorbed him completely. Technical specifications, safety regulations, the careful documentation required to translate mechanical observations into legal language that couldn't be dismissed. This was his life now, translating between machines and managers, preventing disasters that would remain forever hypothetical if he did his job correctly. Around midnight, exhausted but unable to sleep, Marcus pulled out the construction paper drawing Emma had given him at the courthouse. "My dad is a hero." Simple words, second-grade handwriting, carrying more weight than any verdict. He didn't feel like a hero. Heroes charged into burning buildings, not maintenance tunnels. Heroes save people from villains, not from pressure systems and management negligence. But maybe heroism was just showing up when showing up mattered, doing hard things because nobody else would, accepting consequences because some costs were worth paying. Sarah would have understood that. His wife, who'd fought cancer with the same stubborn determination Marcus brought to mechanical problems, who'd never complained even when pain made complaint justified, who'd spent her last conscious moments making Marcus promise to keep caring even when caring hurt. "I'm trying, Sarah," he whispered to the empty bedroom. "Not sure I'm succeeding, but I'm trying." Outside, Bridgeport slept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, solo assignment in Youngstown, continued adjustment to consulting work, the ongoing process of proving himself in a field that was simultaneously foreign and familiar. But tonight, Marcus Webb was home, his daughter safe in bed, his integrity intact, his future uncertain, but no longer catastrophic. The pressure gauge of his life had dropped from critical to merely elevated. Not perfect, not comfortable, but sustainable. And in the mathematics of survival that single parents learn to calculate, sustainable counted as victory. He checked on Emma one final time before attempting sleep. She lay sprawled across her bed in the particular abandon of secure children, her stuffed rabbit clutched close, her face peaceful. Marcus adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead, and allowed himself to believe that maybe, despite unemployment and court cases and burned bridges, he'd made choices that would eventually feel like wisdom instead of desperation. In the morning, he would start preparing for Youngstown. But tonight belonged to the quiet satisfaction of battles fought and survived, of principles maintained when abandoning them would have been easier, of looking in the mirror and seeing someone his daughter could admire without qualification. The reflection looking back was tired, scarred by recent events, uncertain about tomorrow. But it was honest. And in the end, honesty was the only inheritance that mattered. The thing Marcus could pass to Emma that wouldn't depreciate or fail or disappoint when pressure built and easy answers evaporated. He thought about writing down something profound, some lesson learned from recent events that could guide future decisions. But the words wouldn't come, and maybe that was fine. Some wisdom resisted articulation, living instead in muscle memory and split-second choices, emerging only when circumstances demanded courage that preparation couldn't provide. Marcus turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and let exhaustion finally claim him. Tomorrow would arrive regardless of whether he felt ready. But tonight, for the first time since his termination, he could sleep without catastrophic anxiety gnawing at the edges of consciousness. The world outside continued spinning, factories operating, pressure building and releasing in endless cycles, metal straining under forces that time and negligence made unbearable. But somewhere in Bridgeport, a single father and his 7-year-old daughter were safe, employed, moving forward instead of drowning. It wasn't the ending Marcus had imagined when he walked into Riverside Manufacturing on that November morning, but it was the ending he'd earned through choices that valued human life over procedural convenience, principles over paychecks, the long-term cost of compromise over the short-term comfort of compliance. And as sleep finally took him, Marcus Webb discovered that peace came not from perfect outcomes, but from decisions you could defend when your daughter asked why you did what you did. Everything else was just details, negotiable and temporary, subordinate to the fundamental question that defined character. When forced to choose between what was right and what was easy, which path did you take? Marcus had chosen. The consequences were his to carry, but so was the certainty that when the next crisis arrived, and it would arrive, because crisis was the constant in industrial work, he would make the same choice again, regardless of cost. Some things mattered more than safety, and knowing that, living that, teaching that to Emma through action rather than lecture, that was legacy worth building, one difficult decision at a time.